If it shall appear that while I have had the honor of the presidency, that I have contributed to the part required from this high office to bringing the Republic through this dark night, and if in my administration we shall see the break of dawn of the better day, I shall have done my part in the world.
I think that had Hoover not been elected president and not subsequently become known to Americans for his presidency, I think Hoover would have gone down in history as the great humanitarian of his era.
What happened here in Belgium in the fall of 1914 and throughout the First World War was the feeding of an entire civilian population that otherwise would not have had enough food to live.
He set up a gigantic organization by private means.
He was a man of economic efficiency.
My grandfather was basically a problem solver and very, very good at it. Herbert Hoover was a doer.
Good morning. I'm Tom Korologos, U.S. Ambassador to the Kingdom of Belgium, and I want to thank everyone for coming to the museum this morning. We're here to commemorate our project remembering Herbert Hoover and the Commission for Relief in Belgium.
When I first came to Belgium, I discovered a lot of Hoover activity. Hoover this, Hoover that, Hoover Street, Hoover Foundation.
Hoover Squares, Hoover buildings.
Hoover Library, Hoover Bust.
It occurred to me that Hoover was one of these major events in the history of my country.
Greetings to all the members of our State Department family serving at Embassy Brussels. It is a pleasure to help you launch today's exhibit honoring President Herbert Hoover's leadership of the Commission for Relief in Belgium. Through this exhibit, we recognize the significant role that our 31st President played in building America's friendship with Belgium, and we honor his special contribution to the Belgian people.
This is his mother,
Yeah.
and that's her mother.
Oh, my. Both of them.
Both of them together.
We decided to do the public diplomacy piece on this because it was an excellent, long, good story that hadn't been told.
In 1914, Belgium is one of the most productive and prosperous countries in the world. The German invasion puts a brutal end to this. Soon, industry and trade begin grinding to a halt, with further negative impact on agriculture. A British naval blockade prevents food imports, while the occupying power refuses to provide for the population. Each Belgian is left to fend for himself.
With the German occupation and the British blockade, and then the general disarray, what with fighting going on in the very country, immediately problems were very, very serious.
Everyone thinks the conflict will be short-lived. Everyone is wrong. The first humanitarian disaster of the 20th century has begun.
When population was indeed threatened with starvation, Francqui took the initiative to get in touch with Mr. Hoover, explaining that the Americans should do something. At that time, the United States was neutral in the war. And indeed, Hoover responded in a very efficient way.
He had been the vehicle for helping stranded Americans who were moving from Europe, escaping Europe, and trying to, of course, via London, find a way back to the United States.
Francqui had come to London representing Belgians anxious to procure food from the outside world, and Hoover was asked to organize an effort to bring food relief through the British blockade past the German occupation authorities and have that food delivered to the Belgian population.
The CRB, the Commission for Relief of Belgium, was not at that time the United Nations or an official humanitarian agency. No, it was a private initiative, supported by many, many citizens in the United States and also here in Belgium.
What we had here was a man who felt deeply about his fellow man and about the concern for starving people that he didn't want to let go without trying to do something about it.
One man, Herbert Hoover, joined forces with leading Belgian businessmen to bring food relief to millions in Belgium and northern France. A master of publicity, Hoover appeals to the people of the United States, Great Britain and France. He asks for money to buy food and charter ships. Working without pay and with help from devoted friends, Hoover creates a unique humanitarian entity that one British diplomat called a piratical state organized for benevolence.
There's a phrase in the exhibit, it's sort of, words without action are the assassins of idealism. So it's not enough to talk about something or other. You've got to go and take action, do something.
The design concept of the exhibition comes from the quotations of Herbert Hoover. You just see first big quotation on big banners. But if you go behind these banners, you see what he did.
In juxtaposition to the noble humanitarian work was the artwork that was made out of the weapons of war. And here were interesting objects, but made out of bullets and shells.
I liked very much the cartoons because it portrays the sense of humor that the Belgians still had despite all the hardships that they were subjected to. It's also interesting how people make the best out of war.
One of the hallmarks of Hoover Relief was the application of commercial principles to philanthropy.
He rallied people who were experienced managers and business people to come and apply those talents to the relief area.
This was not a matter of having Sunday afternoon teas and raising a little money and distributing it to a few people. He had to organize very efficiently.
So for a lot of people on the outside, this looked like American business. And so for Hoover, he had a lot of work to do publicity-wise in order to get the word out that this was indeed philanthropy and not American business.
Rebuilt after the disastrous fire of the first keeper here. Yeah.
The destruction of Leuven was a major horror story of the First World War.
It was a very old library with very, very old manuscripts. All this was destroyed.
There was money left over from the relief project, and Herbert Hoover said, we don't want it back, we want to give it to various universities around Belgium to rebuild their schools.
1928, so the memory of Herbert Hoover and the CRB. This book is, I believe, the only one that survived the First World War fire.
Finally, the Americans, together with Belgians, built that marvelous library we have today in Leuven, thanks to the generosity of many, many American universities.
Every so often, a stone is engraved with the name of an American college as a symbol of the great contributions of the American people. The Belgian American Education Foundation is a major leftover in terms of activity of the CRB.
There are now 3,000 or more students have gone to the United States, all as a result of the Belgian American Education Foundation, which was using funds left over from the Committee for Relief of Belgium. One of the most fascinating events that occurred during Hoover Week was a seminar and lectures and discussions by the four famous historians that had come to join us. Never in one room had there been so much Hoover knowledge and wattage in one place.
It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all here for this afternoon.
Hoover entered even more prominently onto the international stage. He was no longer just the almoner of Belgium. He had become the food regulator for the world. Between 1914, when he began relief work here in Belgium, and 1923, when he completed his relief work in Russia and in the intervening period in many other countries, at least 80 million people received food from sources that Hoover, at least in part, was responsible for.
A little extra food above the meager ration brings a little happiness to a hungry child.
Hoover ended up saving many lives and, very importantly, helping to revive the European economy.
Former President Herbert Hoover returns to Washington after a 35,000-mile presidential mission. At the request of President Truman, Mr. Hoover made a worldwide survey of the needs of famine-stricken countries and the ability of other countries to aid them.
That example of humanitarian relief administered efficiently on a massive scale became part of the world's memory.
Modern NGOs and relief organizations operating not only in America and around the world owe a debt to Herbert Hoover.
Hoover was in some ways the inspiration for the establishment of UNICEF after World War II, and in fact the first executive director had been one of Hoover's associates in the CRB in World War I.
There is genocide in Darfur right now. There are contemporary problems that are not obviously just like the one the exhibit is about, but still, the exhibits tell a story. And they remind you of your relationship and its depth and its background.
I hope this exhibit will remind Belgians and Americans, especially young people, today that the United States and Belgium have been friends for a very long time. Thank you very much.
I found it fascinating to think that here in the United States, I don't know how many miles away from the heart of Antwerp or Bruges or Brussels, there is an individual who said, I need to help these people. When I saw the letters, and I saw especially these drawings by children sent to American children, I found that very, very touching.
It was just more than an exhibit with documents and pieces of paper and also moving letters and objects. It was also a content of emotion and of gratefulness.
One of the most important things you do in diplomacy is what I call gardening. If you plant a garden and you go away for 6 months and come back, what have you got? Weeds. But a good gardener keeps at it all the time, gets the weeds out when they're small. So this exhibit it's a sort of effort at gardening. And it's a way of people in the United States paying tribute and getting to know people in Belgium and vice versa, and reminding ourselves that we have some very deep values that we share.